and carotenes, beta-carotene, alpha-carotene, astaxanthin, lutein, lycopene, quercetin, and much more. Save your money, save your time. Compare, and you'll find that there is no more researched or superior product available on the market today. Call now and get your discount prices on your next Bio Superfood at 303-257-7576, 303-257-7576, or biosuperfood@hotmail.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tom Phillips, founder of the Green Herb.
All of God's people have a ministry, and it's a trick of our enemy to keep God's people sick and worn out to hinder their ability to minister. We are often judgmental toward people who are addicted to booze, cigarettes, and drugs, but we at the Green Herb have found that most of God's people are unknowingly addicted to the two most addictive products in America, sugar and soda pop. If you have a sickness or disease, or if you're just tired a lot, the Green Herb has an herbal product that is formulated just for you, and it's just $15.95. Come by the Green Herb, located in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, on the I-70 Frontage Road North, 1 mile west of Kipling, or call 888-765-HERB. That's 888-765-4372, or go to our website, www.thegreenherb.com, and be sure to listen to the Green Herb Show with Linda and Dr. Cass every Tuesday at 1 o'clock on KHNC.
$20.3 trillion is reportedly being hidden in offshore banks by the global elite. The fundraiser-in-chief's campaign is on an unsustainable spending spree, and guess whose money he's spending? Anti-Semitism is sweeping France. GlaxoSmithKline has reportedly pleaded guilty to criminal charges in what's being called the largest healthcare fraud case in history. And James Holmes is not alone. 20 more examples of the sickos that are overrunning America. My name is Howard Riell, and this is Real Truth. You're listening to the American Freedom Network, streaming live around the world at AmericanNewsNet.com, and on Facebook and YouTube and Real TV, and in the book, Real Truth, Stay Angry. And, of course, as always, broadcasting out across the Colorado Front Range on KHNC, Johnstown, Colorado, 1360 AM. The Lion. Our call-in number, 877-254-7524, item. This is what $1 trillion looks like from the Activist Post. According to the most detailed study of the so-called offshore economy to date, conducted by James Henry, former chief economist with the consultancy McKinsey, the world's richest people have taken advantage of cross-border tax laws in order to put away a shocking $20.31 trillion in offshore banks. While this likely isn't all that crazy to those who are familiar with the massive conflicts of interest in the Federal Reserve and the fact that the Federal Reserve works with banks to put Americans on the line for the failures of banks, it might be surprising to those who have no clue how the international financial system works. The astounding sum uncovered by Henry is slightly less than the 2011 gross domestic product of Japan and on top of the 2011 United States GDP. The findings were published in a new report called The Price of Offshore Revisited, which shows that money continues to leak out of the major nations and into infamous tax havens like Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. These transactions are enabled by private banking institutions, which all battle to get the accounts of what The Guardian calls the global super-rich elite, also known as high-net-worth individuals. Henry demonstrates that sums between $20.3 trillion and $31.23 trillion have made their way from countries around the world into these secretive banking jurisdictions. Thus, the wealth of these ultra-rich individuals is, quote, protected by a highly paid, industrious bevy of professional enablers in the private banking, legal, accounting, and investment industries, taking advantage of the increasingly borderless, frictionless global economy, unquote. Such is the glory with globalization. With liberalized trade and finance laws, what petty issues must the so-called global elite be concerned with? None. No more pesky regulations and legal issues to worry about when dealing with huge sums of money. Henry's research revealed that the world's top 10 private banking institutions managed over $6 trillion in 2010 alone. This is obviously a major increase from the $2.3 trillion in 2005. Among others, these banking institutions include the U.S.-based Goldman Sachs and the Swiss UBS and Credit Suisse. The research used a wide variety of sources, including none other than the Bank of International Settlements and the International Monetary Fund, and led to some quite astounding conclusions. The analysis in the report revealed that in some developing countries, the amount of money which has left the country since the 1970s would easily be able to pay the country's debts. Stop! Why not audit the Fed? Why not do away with the Fed? Because the politicians won't have it. Why? Because the politicians get rich from it. Why? Because the bankers are willing to keep it going. Why? Because the bankers get amazingly rich from it. Why? Because they take our money and make it theirs. I'm going to read this last paragraph again. The analysis in the report revealed in some developing countries the amount of money that has left the country since the 70s would easily be able to pay the country's debt. Debt, my friends, is a loaded gun pointed at you and me. It is generated intentionally to keep us down, to keep us owing, to keep us bent over a barrel. What the Federal Reserve is a debt-creating machine. It's all it was ever intended to be. It has powers beyond that, but that is its main function. It is a central bank like central banks around the world. The job is to funnel our money to the elite. And they do a very good job. And most of us don't even know that it's happening. That's how good a job it's doing. But look at the deficits that are being faced in countries around the world. First of all, politicians who were in league with the bankers ran up these debts that you and I now need to pay. Second, the money with which we could have paid them has been suctioned away from us. And so we have gotten a 1-2 punch, a double whammy. Having our money taken away, actually a 3-part punch. Having the money that remains inflated and so it's worth less. And then forcing us to pay back the debt that others have generated. I don't know whether you've seen the new Batman movie. I'm not sure it's politically correct for me to talk about it in the wake of the shooting in Aurora, but I saw it. There were some pretty frightening things in there because they are awfully close to what is or what might be. There are scenes in the movie where the wealthy are dragged out of their homes into the streets, and their homes are taken by the mob, the masses. My friends, I don't ever want to see that happen in America, because once that happens, it means we've lost America. But that's certainly what a lot of people are thinking these days. It's certainly what some people could be pushed into trying these days, and I understand them. I understand why. Unfair advantages, tax loopholes, politicians in their pockets, and the super rich have no problem taking our money. It's not a matter of survival of the economic fittest. It's not a matter of the free market. It's a matter of greed and buying politicians. It's illegal. It's certainly immoral. We need to take the system back. We need to start by getting angry. If you're not angry, and I tell you on the show all the time to stay angry, it presupposes that you've gotten angry. If you're not angry by now, then you need to see a therapist. When I read about the ways in which we are all ripped off and stepped on and crushed and ignored, it makes me plenty angry, not just for myself, but for my children, and eventually their children. What about yours? What about your family? Their futures are being given away. Are you angry? Better be. I'll do my best to make you that way. We'll be back with more Real Truth.
Now this is the testimony of John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" And he answered, "No." The Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 19 through 21.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution.
Restore Health and Counseling salutes the men and women in uniform who've answered the call for our freedoms. Let's give them the hero's welcome they deserve, as they have fought hard to restore peace. America's troops are our angels of protection, so stand up and salute them proudly. That's from Restore Health and Counseling at 4705 Paris Street, serving Northeast Denver with complete substance abuse counseling for adolescent to adult and for private as well as professional drug, alcohol screening and treatment and rehabilitation. Visit us at www.rhctherapy.com or call 303-373-1188. Whether you're in automotive, sporting goods, hardware, health, wellness, electrical, electronics, construction, carpet cleaning, legal, or animal care, and offer exceptional customer service and provide quality services or goods, you're honest, reliable, and professional. If you have a business, we have the customers. Let us put you in touch with our loyal, supportive, and dedicated listeners today. They're waiting to hear from you. It's inexpensive. It's effective. Call KHNC at 1-800-205-6245.
Folks, welcome back to a brand new week of Real Truth. Housekeeping note, there'll be no show tomorrow, but we will be back on Wednesday. Dick Morris is with us again via video from his website, dickmorris.com, talking about how the Republicans lost the black vote. It's worth our time. Let's listen.
The history of the black vote in America. That's what we'll talk about in today's history video. Welcome to the weekend. The black vote in the United States has a very interesting history. Right after the Civil War, when blacks, at least in the South, were permitted to vote, the North they still in many states weren't. But when they did vote during Reconstruction, they of course voted solidly Republican, and the whites voted Democrat because the Democrats had been supporting the Confederacy and the Republicans had been supporting the Union. That pattern continued till about the 1930s. Blacks were not permitted to vote in the South after federal troops withdrew in 1876, and after that, of course, it was an all-white vote in the South. But in the North, blacks routinely voted Republican. Then FDR made some inroads with the New Deal and with his anti-poverty programs, and succeeded in getting about a third of the black vote. But by the time Eisenhower ran for president in the 1950s, a majority of blacks were voting Republican. Jackie Robinson, who integrated baseball, for example, was a prominent Republican. And the Republican Party was seen as the party of civil rights. When the first civil rights bill came up for a vote in 1957, there was a crucial amendment that the Southerners wanted. And John Kennedy, as a senator, voted for it, and Richard Nixon, as vice president, broke the tie for the pro-civil rights forces, the opposite of what you would think. Then during the 1960 campaign, Martin Luther King was imprisoned, and at that point, Bobby Kennedy and John Kennedy both called Coretta Scott King, his wife, and expressed their sympathy and released to the public the fact that they'd done so, and Bobby called the sheriff's office and made sure that he was released because people were worried that he'd be lynched in jail. And that call got a lot of publicity. A lot of black churches, leaflets were distributed. And as a result, Kennedy carried the black vote, the first time a Democrat ever did, by a relatively modest margin, about 60-40. Then came the real denouement in 1964, when Lyndon Johnson took John Kennedy's civil rights bill that was the landmark statute that prohibited discrimination in public accommodations. And Kennedy had never been able to get it passed, but Johnson got it through. Fascinating story about that in Robert Caro's new biography of Johnson, his last volume that he just published, Passage to Power, worth reading. But Johnson got it through. But the only way he got it through was with massive Republican support. because all the Southern Democrats, and the South was then entirely represented by Democrats, voted against the Civil Rights Bill. And the hero of the hour was Everett Dirksen, the Republican leader from Illinois, who was the Republican minority leader, who came out dramatically in favor of the Civil Rights Bill. Nobody thought he would, and led all but 6 Republican senators into voting for the bill. That was on July 1st, 1964. Well, July 7th was the Republican National Convention, and Barry Goldwater was nominated as the Republican candidate. And Goldwater was one of the 6 Republicans who had voted against the Civil Rights Bill. Not that Barry was in the least bit a racist at all. It's that he felt that this should be done at the state level, not at the federal level, which meant, of course, it wouldn't happen in the South because the blacks couldn't vote and the state governments were all controlled by whites. He was doing it as a matter of principle, but nobody made that distinction. Anyway, the black vote tilted solidly in favor of Johnson. It went 90% for Johnson, and it has remained so to this day. Now, there's a lesson in all of this. This happened 46 years ago, and the African-American vote still goes 90% Democrat. There are some brave souls that vote Republican. There are some braver souls that speak out, many of them on television, and bless them. But the overwhelming majority of the African Americans go Democrat. We mustn't let the same thing happen with Latinos. They are going to be a huge voting population. They already, in demographics, are larger than the black population. In a few years, they'll outvote the black population, and in 10 years, they'll double the black population to be twice as numerous. And it is crucial that we reach out to them in a way that Goldwater stopped us from doing with the African American vote. That's one of the key reasons that I'm in favor of Romney nominating Marco Rubio for vice president. Thanks a lot for watching.
Item from columnist Michelle Malkin. Naturally, President Obama runs his campaign like he runs the country, spending like there's no tomorrow. Via the Wall Street Journal comes news that some Democrats are worried the fundraiser in chief isn't raising enough funds to keep up with bills. George Clooney better head back to Switzerland with a bigger money bag. Stat. More, faster, faster. The Obama administration, the Obama campaign has been spending heavily on payroll, television ads, and polling for months, hoping to tarnish Republican challenger Mitt Romney in the eyes of voters in an early stage of the general election showdown. But some Democrats worry that the overhead built by the Obama camp over the past 15 months will prove impossible to sustain. The president spent twice as much as Romney in June as his campaign purchased more TV ads, paid more than twice as many employees, and spent millions of dollars on public opinion polls, federal records show. June was the second month in a row that Mr. Obama's campaign dipped into the red. Stop right there. My friends, you haven't yet cast your vote. Think. Mr. Obama has spent us into the Stone Age. Will things get better if he gets reelected? His own presidential campaign is in the red. The man does not know how to balance a budget. He never has. He never will. Voting for him will be suicide. Item from USA Stands with Israel. Anti-Semitism is sweeping France. If Europe fails to protect its Jews, it must be feared that soon Christians, too, will no longer feel safe in Europe. When the Jews are made to flee, it will not be long before others will have to flee as well. Early this month, the French weekly magazine Le Nouvel Observateur devoted a cover article and several other articles to the phenomenon of the rising anti-Semitism in France. The magazine referred to several incidents of anti-Jewish violence during the previous weeks. The Council of Jewish Institutions in France, CRIF, keeps track of anti-Semitic incidents. In the past decade, the number rose well above 300 incidents per year. In 2010, there were 466 incidents. In 2011, 389. However, 2012 will break the record. During the first 5 months of 2012 already, 268 incidents of hatred against Jews have been reported. In certain neighborhoods in Paris, Marseille, or Lyon, it is no longer safe for Jews to walk the streets. Young Jews in particular are made to suffer for their Jewishness. Le Nouvel Observateur relates how Elie M., a 12-year-old Jewish Parisian, told his parents he wants to have his name changed because he's being called a dirty Jew at school.
On March 26th, an 11-year-old Jewish boy was hit in the face in front of a school in Paris by a man who was screaming, "Dirty Jew." That same day in the Rhone Valley, youths threw stones at a rabbi. On April 30th, 2 Jewish boys were beaten up in Marseille by an aggressor shouting, "We support the Palestinians. You will be killed. You will be exterminated." On June 8th, a Jewish adolescent was beat up by 3 youths who were shouting anti-Semitic insults. In early June, 3 Jews were attacked by a gang who hit one of the Jews on the head with a hammer. On July 5th, the very day that the Nouvelle Observatoire was published, a 17-year-old Jew was beaten up in a train near Toulouse because he was wearing a necklace with the Star of David. The aggressors were 2 18-year-old Frenchmen of North African origin who had just applied to join the French army. The victim was a student at the same Jewish school where, last March, the jihadist Mohammed Merah murdered a rabbi and 3 children. Mohammed Merah, the Nouvelle Observatoire points out, has become a role model for many young French of Islamic origin. Stop! French doesn't matter. Could be French, could be American, could be Spanish, could be Swedish. If they are of Islamic origin, then they worship a holy book that tells them the Jews are descended from apes and monkeys, and that the Muslims are to wage war against Jews and Christians and everyone else. So what nationality this fellow is doesn't matter. All that matters is the Islamic part. I'll continue. In many French schools, incidents occurred while a minute of silence was being observed for the victims of the Jewish school in Toulouse. Ioannis Roder, a teacher of history and geography in Saint-Denis near Paris, confirmed in the magazine that anti-Semitism is rising in French schools and that almost always the anti-Jewish venom is coming from Islamic youth. Stop! Where's the surprise? Question: why are there Islamic youths in French schools? As soon as the Holocaust is mentioned in class or whenever lessons deal with a historic French figure who's Jewish, such as Leon Blum, Muslim pupils start making anti-Semitic remarks. Stop. Why are Muslim pupils still in school in France? Or anywhere else in Europe? While the culprits of anti-Semitic acts are predominantly Muslims, analysts point out there are some unsettling similarities with the European anti-Semitisms of the 1930s. According to Muslim youths interviewed by the Nouvelle Observatoire, of every meal bought at McDonald's, €1 is paid by McDonald's to the Israeli army. Coca-Cola, too, is part of the Americo-Jewish plot, as its logo, when read from back to front, allegedly reads, "No to Allah, no to the Prophet." This information, they claim, is well known, although it will never be heard on French television because French television, quote, belongs to the Jews. Because of the rising anti-Semitism, many Jews no longer send their children to public schools. The number of children in Jewish schools has increased to 30,000 and is growing every year. Many of the 600,000 Jews in France no longer feel safe in the country. People ask themselves whether they should stay, says Sammy Goslin of the National Bureau of Vigilance Against Anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, the situation in other Western countries is grimly similar to that in France. Last month, the Italian journalist Giulio Meotti wrote an article about the plight of the Jews in Italy. He described how synagogues and Jewish schools in Rome are protected by cameras, metal detectors, and security guards and police officers, while their windows are plumbed with iron gates like the Jewish homes of Hebron and the schools of Sderot. Already in 2006, the London Daily Telegraph ran a story entitled, "Is This the Last Generation of British Jews?" In 1990, there were estimated to be about 340,000 Jews in Britain. By 2006, the population had declined by a fifth to 270,000. While the article dealt mainly with the consequences of secularism and intermarriage, it referred to a parliamentary inquiry which stated, quote, "Anti-Semitic violence has become endemic in Britain, both in the streets and university campuses. As in France, in Britain in the past few years, emigration to Israel has doubled. In the Netherlands in 2010, Fritz Balkstein, a prominent Jewish conservative and former European commissioner, said there is no future for Jews in this country because of, quote, anti-Semitism among Dutchmen of Moroccan descent, whose number keeps growing, unquote. He referred to the increase in anti-Semitic incidents in the Netherlands over the past decade and urged Jews, quote, to emigrate to the U.S. or Israel. As always, the Jews are like the canary in the coal mine. If Europe fails to protect its Jews, it must be feared that soon Christians, too, will no longer feel safe in Europe. When the Jews are made to flee, it will not be long before others will have to flee as well. Recently, Monsignor Anbad Damian, Bishop of the Coptic Church in Germany, warned that persecutions of Christians might soon be a reality in Germany. There's a real danger that an ever more dominant Islam in Germany will seriously threaten Christians, he said. Many think the bishop is scaremongering. However, as teacher Ioannis Roeder said in the Nouvelle Observatoire in the late 1990s, he could not have believed that anti-Semitism would again have become a common phenomenon in France. I'm from a generation that thought anti-Semitism had died with the Holocaust. I could never have imagined that it would resurface, unquote. My friends know this. Anti-Semitism is built into the fabric of the world. It will always resurface. God judges each of us on how we combat anti-Semitism in particular and racism in general. The Jews are God's chosen people. It is up to the other people of the world to protect them, even as God himself protects them. Why Europe is allowing its Muslim population to stay, I do not know. But I'll tell you this, there will be no peace in Europe or anywhere else as long as Muslims are allowed to roam free and commit acts of violence. Know that.
Just a good old boy. Hi, I'm Eric Cedarstrom. For over a decade, I've been the CEO, shipping clerk, and janitor of the Patriot Trading Group. And in that time, I've made friends with tens of thousands of like-minded individuals all over this country, most like me, trying to raise a family, run a business, and make sense out of a world gone mad. I'm proud of the fact that through stock bubbles, housing bubbles, and financial chaos, our customers are prospering and doing very well. By keeping our prices fair and our service fast, we find that 80% of our customers not only reorder, but they tell their friends. Don't be fooled by hype and high pressure. Do business with a company you can trust. Call the Patriot Trading Group at 1-800-951-0592 or check out our website at allamericangold.com. You'll be treated with honesty and respect. You have my word on it. I'm Eric Cedarstrom, CEO, shipping clerk, and janitor.
Taking their way, the only way they know how.
And of his fullness we have all received, and grace for grace. For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him. The Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 16.
No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque or reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts, pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility. Article 1, Section 10.
The Beth Messiah congregation invites you to come and experience a Messianic Roots biblically based congregational fellowship as we observe God's Shabbat in Messiah Yeshua. Praise and worship services begin at 10:30 a.m., followed by an Oneg Shabbat meal, mid-Rosh, and fellowship. Beth Messiah congregation is located at 8333 Acoma Way in North Denver. You can find out more information by calling 1-800-205-6245. Everyone's welcome, so join us this Shabbat. And Shabbat Shalom, good Sabbath. CINN Stations in Alt salutes our troops. Whether you're for the war or against it, they're still there. These men and women deserve more than our support. They deserve the comfort of home. Send a military care package today. Just type military care package into a search engine, point, and click. Let's show our troops we care. This message from CINN Stations in Alt, wishing Godspeed to our fighting men and women and thanking them for their triumphs and their sacrifices.
Folks, welcome back to Real Truth. Howard Riell presiding. It's not unusual for Mark Levin, the conservative radio talk show host, to follow the lead of Real Truth.
I've had Robert Spencer on the show 2 or 3 times. Well, Mark Levin finally got around to having Spencer on his show. Talk to him about some important stuff. Let's listen.
Robert Spencer is an expert on all things jihad. He's director of Jihad Watch. Robert Spencer, how are you, my friend?
Just great, Mark. How are you?
Very well. I have a question to ask you.
Yes, sir.
Why are Republicans running to the defense of the Muslim Brotherhood, whether it's in Egypt or Libya, and why do they not want to know whether they're having an influence on governmental policy here
I find that
in the United States?
Astonishing thing. You know, I wish I knew the answer. I think I can give you several. One is that they have bought into the media line that the uprisings in the Middle East were a flowering of democracy and pluralism. They don't know, they haven't done their homework about what the Muslim Brotherhood is really all about. This is a group that, according to a captured internal document that was released during the Holy Land Foundation trial in 2007, they're dedicated, in their own words, to eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house. Also, of course, there's Grover Norquist, who has tremendous baneful influence on the Republican Party. He does great work on taxes, but when it comes to Islam and the Muslim Brotherhood, he unfortunately has numerous...
I want to stay focused. I don't want to work on every battle that's going on here. Now, you got to stay focused with me, because right now, Bachmann and Gomert and Rooney and the others are under attack by Boehner and McCain and Graham, and now this guy Rogers, the head of the Intelligence Committee, and I'm scratching my head. He's an ex-FBI agent. Let me tell you something, Robert. When I had all my government positions, boy, did I get an anal exam.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the really ironic thing. Bachmann is just calling for the kind of scrutiny that comes from any ordinary security clearance. And it's a lot of the people that she named, notably Huma Abedin, Hillary Clinton's top aide, were given the kind of scrutiny that comes with the level of access that they ordinarily have. Then her family associations to the Muslim Brotherhood, which are abundantly established, her mother, her father, and her brother are involved in Muslim Brotherhood organizations, they would have come under examination and investigation. But now she's calling for just that kind of investigation, and it's some terrible thing.
And by the way, she's not just calling for that. She's saying that we want to look at generally how this is being handled in these 5 key national security defense-related agencies. And, when I go through TSA, I get quizzed more than apparently Huma Abedin's been quizzed.
That's right. And so it's an entirely legitimate question. And McCain, in response, he's saying, you don't have any evidence. Well, that's what an investigation's for, to see if there is anything going on here. He can't expect her to produce the results of the investigation when what she's doing is calling for exactly that investigation.
And let me say this. I mean, she's not really going after her at all. She wants to... it's publicly available information. She wants to know about it.
Yeah,
and shouldn't members of Congress know about it?
McCain didn't. He focused only on Huma Abedin, and the others have as well. But Bachmann mentioned quite a few other people. Notably, you take, for example, there's Muhammad Ali Biari, who's on the Department of Homeland Security Advisory Committee. This is a guy who spoke at a convention honoring the Ayatollah Khomeini in Texas a few years back, and who wrote to Rod Dreher, a columnist for the Dallas Morning News, saying, you better watch out or somebody's going to put a banana up your tailpipe, meaning somebody's going to explode your car. So this is a guy who sent a threat to a columnist and spoke at a pro-Khomeini convention, and he's on a DHS advisory.
All right, let me stop you there. Has the chairman of the Intelligence Committee in the House, Mike Rogers, showed any interest in that?
None whatsoever.
What's the problem there?
He's clueless and or compromised. That, I think, is the problem all the way through the Washington establishment. They either
I don't think he's compromised. Hold on now. I don't think he's compromised. I just think these guys don't like getting bad articles written about them.
Oh, well, that's a very important consideration as well, Mark. The Council on American Islamic Relations, which has numerous ties to Hamas itself and to the Muslim Brotherhood, they have this very sophisticated PR campaign that's been extraordinarily successful, especially in the Obama years, of stigmatizing as bigoted and racist and Islamophobic anybody who does anything to resist terror. And they've been completely consistent. CAIR has opposed every anti-terror measure and every anti-terror individual, all the way across the board. And yet they continue to get access and respect in the mainstream media.
I'm looking at this article on this report that came out yesterday, the FBI on the FBI, as applies to Fort Hood. It's pretty damning, and one of the things they talk about is political correctness, because the FBI didn't want to really jump into that. I guess concerned for the same reason. Do you know if this is the focus of attention of the House Republican Intelligence Committee?
To some degree, yes. There is some movement inside that committee to address this, particularly in response to Fort Hood, because it's so egregious to call this guy who's shouting Allahu Akbar and passing out Qurans the morning of the shootings, and he murders 13 Americans, and the official report calls it workplace violence, and doesn't mention Islam or jihad at all, when, you know, everything pointed to this guy being a jihadi. And so there is some movement to publish another report that will not only criticize the things that led to Major Hassan being able to commit mass murder at Fort Hood, but will also criticize the analysts who are willfully ignoring the real problem here.
My friends, you can listen to the rest of this clip at therightscoop.com or themarklevinshow.com. I hope that you will listen to it. It's important stuff that we need to know. Item from Reuters. Thousands of people have fled their homes in India's northeastern Assam state after fighting between indigenous tribes and Muslim settlers killed at least 19 people, wounded many more, and left villages in flames, police said on Monday. Item from Reuters. Renewed unrest among minority Shiite Muslims in Saudi Arabia have exposed a rift between their traditional leaders and the younger, more radical generation, exasperated by what they see as persistent discrimination in the mainly Sunni Muslim kingdom. 3 young men were shot dead by security forces in exchanges of fire in the country's east this month, sparked by the arrest of a radical cleric on July 8th. Item from Reuters. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's former top political partner put him on notice on Monday that he would not back Israeli military, quote, adventures. Comments that appear to caution against possible action against Iran. Stop. They're talking about Shaul Mofaz, who is now the opposition leader. He made the remarks less than a week after pulling his centrist Kadima party out of the governing coalition. Shaul Mofaz wants another Holocaust. Or he's a schmuck. It's one or the other. He doesn't want Netanyahu heading any Israeli military adventures, meaning attacking Iran, meaning preventing a nuclear attack by Iran. Leaders like Shaul Mofaz are the reason that Israel has so much trouble. Item from Natural News. The United Kingdom-based pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline, a corporate person in the eyes of the federal government, has pleaded guilty to criminal charges in what even the mainstream media is calling the largest healthcare fraud case in history. And though the company is having to fork over $3 billion in collective fines for its illegal activity, no actual GSK employees or executives are being held personally responsible for their crimes. Stop. Why? Corporations don't run themselves, they're run by executives. Put the executives in jail. That's justice. We'll be back.
The Beth Messiah Congregation invites you to come and experience a Messianic Roots biblically based congregational fellowship as we observe God's Shabbat in Messiah Yeshua. Praise and worship services begin at 10:30 a.m., followed by an Oneg Shabbat meal mid-Rosh and fellowship. Beth Messiah Congregation is located at 8333 Acoma Way in North Denver. You can find out more information by calling 1-800-205-6245. Everyone's welcome, so join us this Shabbat. And Shabbat Shalom, good Sabbath.
An emergency preparedness plan for your home, car, school, and office is a must. Knowing how to store water safely, survive extreme temperature changes, provide reliable shelter, first aid, and sanitation is critical. Knowing where to get the best lights, radios, and other supplies is easy. Ferris Survival, located at 3366 South Broadway, is a professional, reputable, full-service business providing realistic preparedness supplies at affordable prices. Stop by, go online, or call 303-781-0343, 866-781-0343. If you're spending hard-earned money on supplements, you need to know about BioSuperfood because you're probably shortchanging yourself on nutrition and value. If you're buying products claiming to provide DNA protection from radiation, you're getting ripped off by inferior copycat products because there's no other product developed or researched like BioSuperfood. BioSuperfood is one complete superfood product that addresses radiation poisoning, allergies, arthritis, diabetes, high blood pressure, and other degenerative diseases. BioSuperfood helps digestion, decreases pain and inflammation, increases flexibility, improves heart health and brain function. It boosts your immune system and even inhibits the AIDS virus and cancerous cells. It's an antibacterial, antifungal, and anti-inflammatory. BioSuperfood is not another supplement. It's a whole food and contains over 5,000 nutrients. Call now and ask about your special discounts on your BioSuperfood purchase at 303-257-7576. That's 303-257-7576 or biosuperfood@hotmail.com.
On Shabbat, July the 7th, Beth Messiah Congregation invites you to join them in praise and worship with Sue Samuels, a Hebraic root singer from Rhode Island. Sue and her husband Brian have been sharing music together for over 15 years, and together they have 3 CDs. Again, the date is July the 7th at 10:45. That's at 8333 Acoma Way, Beth Messiah Congregation, and we'll see you there.
Welcome back to Real Truth. Item from WesternJournalism.com. When Barack Obama signs the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty later this month, the force of his signature alone could suffice to nullify the Second Amendment rights of the American people. How is this possible if a two-thirds vote by the Senate, that is constitutionally mandated ratification, is required before the United States becomes a legal party to any treaty? Interested Americans have been told that the Arms Trade Treaty will regulate the international trade of conventional weapons, the purported goal being prevention of arms transfers to rogue or terrorist states. Naturally, one would think regulations intended only to manage and restrict the trade of weapons to dangerous, warlike, or terror-supporting countries couldn't possibly threaten the constitutionally protected right of American citizens to keep and bear arms. However, in order to prevent the accumulation and export of possible contraband weapons, the treaty mandates creation of a global arms catalog, an international registry detailing the existence, history, and ownership records of all conventional weapons. Every sale, every transfer of a weapon within the borders of the United States would be contained in this registry. The left have dreamed of such a national gun registry for decades, and this would give it to them. How could the gun-grabbing Obama regime impose this clearly anti-Second Amendment treaty-mandated arms registration scheme on the American people without the Senate first giving its advice and consent? When a nation signs a treaty, it is obligated to refrain from actions that would defeat the object and purpose of the treaty until such time as it makes clear its intent not to become a party to the treaty. This is the language from Article 18 of the Vienna Convention of the Law on the Law of Treaties. Adopted in 1969, 111 nations have ratified the Vienna Convention, a treaty which has become known as the Treaty of Treaties and is, quote, widely recognized as the authoritative guide vis-a-vis the information and effects of treaties, unquote. The bottom line is this, my friends. We have less and less and less to say about how our government operates. Decision-making has been taken away from us. The influence we have on the people who do make the decisions has never been lower. And now the rules for how we Americans live our lives are being written and mandated by people outside the United States with the full complicity of our own so-called leaders. Countries as powerful as the United States never get conquered from outside, only from inside. Item from Madison Rupert writing at the Activist Post. Finally, the U.S. government formally admitted that their incredibly massive surveillance program has, in fact, violated our right to be safe from unreasonable search and seizure as protected by the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. Senator Ron Wyden, an Oregon Democrat, previously revealed the so-called Secret Patriot Act, and along with Senator Mark Udall, has called for the Obama administration to declassify the rulings of the Secret Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court. Now, thanks to a letter from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Wyden is able to say that, quote, on at least one occasion, unquote, the FISA court found the so-called minimization procedures used by the government while collecting intelligence were, quote, unreasonable under the Fourth Amendment. Unfortunately, Wyden's knowledge still seems quite limited. He does not know exactly how widespread this clearly illegal surveillance was, when it actually occurred, or even how many American people have been targeted. Stop, my friends. It's no coincidence that he doesn't have these answers. He's not intended to have these answers. Neither are we. All we're intended to have is a memory of a time when we lived in a country that was free. Item from Jihad Watch. In Representative Keith Ellison rewrites history on his Muslim Brotherhood care ties at P Media, July 21, the peerless investigator Patrick Poole uncovers Representative Keith Ellison's extensive ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas-linked care, which Ellison is working hard to cover up. The most recent salvo in the kerfuffle between Minnesota Congressperson Michelle Bachmann and Keith Ellison finds Ellison attacking Bachmann for her statements made on Glenn Beck's radio program on Thursday, where she said, quote, Glenn said, okay, so when you wrote this letter, then Keith Ellison comes out, and Keith Ellison has a record of being the mafia hitman. Congresswoman Bachmann said, well, he has a long record of being associated with CARE and with the Muslim Brotherhood. CARE is an unindicted co-conspirator, as stated in the large terrorist financing case that we've had in the United States of America so far. He came out and essentially wanted to shut down the inspectors general from even looking into any of the questions that they were asking. So he wanted to shut it down. In response, I wrote another letter back to Keith Ellison, a 16-page letter, which I would encourage all of your listeners to go and read. It's what I call a bulletproof letter. I have 59 footnotes with one example after another of the penetration of the Muslim Brotherhood into the federal government. Stop! The penetration, my friends, of the Muslim Brotherhood into the federal government. There was a time in the past when such a thing was called treason. It was called espionage. It was called an act of war. Where has the truth gone? Item from Jihad Watch. Muslims in Thailand misunderstand Ramadan, murder one person and injure 7 in bomb blast. Somehow these misunderstanders of Islam didn't get the memo that Ramadan is a time to reconcile differences and seek peace. And oddly enough, they misunderstand Islam and Ramadan in exactly the same way as the Muslims in Bulgaria, who somehow got the crazy idea that Ramadan is a month of holy war and death for Allah. It is a month for fighting the enemies of Allah and God's messenger, the Jews and their American facilitators. What an odd coincidence. Muslims have begun fasting, this is from AP, for the start of the Ramadan holy month in Indonesia, Malaysia, and elsewhere. My friends, suffice it to say this, Ramadan is said to be a holiday that celebrates peace, and instead every year Muslims kill, murder, and commit acts of mayhem on Ramadan. So one has to question their religious convictions. Item from Jihad Watch. Independent panel ignores role of Islam in Fort Hood jihad attack. As Pam Geller explains in detail here, nothing else but Islam motivated Nidal Hassan to commit mass murder. My friends, nothing else. Nothing else but Islam was needed. We'll be back.
Why do the nations rage, and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bonds in pieces, and cast away their cords from us. Psalm 1, verses 1 through 3.
Holy is the Lord.
Article 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the places to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Whether you're in automotive, sporting goods, hardware, health, wellness, electrical, electronics, construction, carpet cleaning, legal, or animal care, and offer exceptional customer service and provide quality services or goods, you're honest, reliable, and professional. If you have a business, we have the customers. Let us put you in touch with our loyal, supportive, and dedicated listeners today. They're waiting to hear from you. It's inexpensive. It's effective. Call KHNC at 1-800-205-6245. Restore Health and Counseling salutes the men and women in uniform who've answered the call for our freedoms. Let's give them the hero's welcome they deserve as they have fought hard to restore peace. America's troops are our angels of protection, so stand up and salute them proudly. That's from Restore Health and Counseling at 4705 Paris Street, serving Northeast Denver with complete substance abuse counseling for adolescent to adult and for private as well as professional drug, alcohol screening and treatment and rehabilitation. Visit us at www.rhctherapy.com or call 303-373-1188.
4 minutes and go from Congressman Ron Paul. The senseless and horrific killings last week at the movie theater in Colorado reminded Americans that life is fragile and beautiful, and we should not take family, friends, and loved ones for granted. Our prayers go out to the injured victims and the families of those killed. As a nation, we should use this terrible event to come together with the resolve to create a society that better values life. We should also face the sober reality that the government cannot protect us from all possible harm. No matter how many laws we pass, no matter how many police or federal agents we put on the street, no matter how routinely we monitor Internet communications, a determined individual or group can still cause great harm. We as individuals are responsible for our safety and the safety of our families. Furthermore, it is the role of civil society rather than government to build a culture of responsible, peaceful, and productive individuals. Government cannot mandate morality or instill hope in troubled individuals. External controls on our behavior imposed by government through laws, police, and jails usually apply only after a terrible crime has occurred. Internal self-governance, by contrast, is a much more powerful regulator of human behavior than any law. This self-governance must be developed from birth, first by parents, but later also through the positive influences of relatives and adult role models. Beyond childhood, character development can occur through religious, civic, and social institutions. Ultimately, self-governance cannot be developed without an underlying foundation of morality. Government, however, is not a moral actor. The state should protect our rights, but it cannot develop our character. Whenever terrible crimes occur, many Americans understandably demand the government do something to prevent similar crimes in the future. But this reflexive impulse most always leads to bad laws and the loss of liberty. Do we really want to live in a world of police checkpoints, surveillance cameras, and metal detectors? Do we really believe government can provide total security? Do we want to involuntarily commit every disaffected, disturbed, or alienated person who fantasizes about violence? Or can we accept that liberty is more important than the illusion of state-provided security? Freedom is not defined by safety. Freedom is defined by the ability of citizens to live without government interference. Government cannot create a world without risks, nor would we really wish to live in such a fictional place. Only a totalitarian society would even claim absolute safety as a worthy ideal because it would require total state control over its citizens' lives. Liberty has meaning only if we still believe in it when terrible things happen and a false government security blanket beckons, unquote. My friends, let's put this Aurora, Colorado shooting in perspective, because the worst thing that could happen, the very worst thing, is for us to minimize the threat of Muslim jihad by saying, look, the Muslims aren't the only ones who go around killing. Look at that guy in Aurora, Colorado. And the fact of the matter is, the guy in Aurora, Colorado is allegedly a nut. And there have always been nuts, and there always will be nuts, but he's alone. You don't get to multiply Mr. Holmes by 1.5 billion. Once you do the equation changes. There are millions of Muslims all over America, all throughout Europe. They all read the book that says they should conquer us. A little bit different threat than what James Holmes presented to us. There will always be people who will go bananas and commit unspeakable acts of evil. That's simply the way the world works. But when you know who's coming at you, when you know who the enemy is, when you know whose culture, whose religious upbringing tells them to kill you, then they become less responsible for the murders they commit, and we become more responsible. We are off tomorrow. I'll be back with more Real Truth on Wednesday. My friend, hasta lumbago.